1990, I moved to a street called Arnaz Drive, and I was a young guy, 23, had been working at NBC in New York and decided I wanted to come to Hollywood and I wanted to become an actor. And today I'm at the Four Seasons, and the Four Seasons Hotel is literally 3 blocks from where I was. And in that period of my life, in the early 90s for me, I was ringing checks at the Palm Restaurant, which was working for my dad. I was going out on commercial auditions. I was a shitty actor. At that time, Julia Roberts was hitting with Pretty Woman. George Clooney was hitting with ER. And I was a schlump. And here I am today, sitting at the Four Seasons, waiting to have drinks with George and Julia. George Clooney, thank you for coming to my party. George and Julia arrive with a posse of publicists and assistants because they have spent the entire day promoting their new movie, Ticket to Paradise.
George has to go do an interview after this.
I know, he's got to do
This wraps you up?
There's nothing going to be filmed or anything, right?
No, I might take a selfie with us and that's
All right.
it. But just as fast as the storm of celebrity rolls into room 210 of the Four Seasons, it rolls out again. And I find myself with a couple of old friends catching up over drinks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
What are you drinking?
I'm drinking Bourgeon.
There you go.
There you go.
does that mean?
Bourgeon is
that's
my
her
show
liquor.
chew. So this is a super exciting day and just goes to show you, you never know what's going to happen when you pull up a chair. I'm Bruce Bozzi, and this is my podcast, Table for Two. Okay, guys. So, welcome to Table for Two.
Thank you.
But it's table for 3 today.
So when you want to have lunch or drinks with Julia Roberts, sometimes you get George Clooney.
Yeah, sometimes you get stuck.
I think it's
like a tumor on your shoulder.
So today has been all about your movie, and I don't know much about junkets, but how are you holding up?
Incredibly well.
Yes.
And I think for a couple of reasons that are unique. One, we get to be together.
Yeah.
Which anytime you're with a friend conversing, it's always just nicer. But, this movie is so much about us and our friendship, our chemistry, that to be able to promote it, which is what the junket is, together is really fun.
Right.
And that we're actually not sitting in front of a computer screen talking to people who are, who knows where, probably without pants on.
Right. Ooh.
I mean...
I'm not wearing pants as we speak right now.
Yeah, because we're on the radio.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The radio, is that what we are?
The radio.
It's fun to do a junket with Julie also because I think people are shocked at how much shit we will give each other.
Yeah.
And I think that's always fun too because they're always like, oh!
I know there's a couple, more than a couple, but a few times today where somebody's like,
Yeah.
is that, okay. The next question would be like...
Really stop dead in their tracks, super uncomfortable. Well, I mean, that brings up a question for me because, there's such chemistry between you guys. And, we've seen it a multitude of times in the movies. And there's, famous pairs, like...
Turner and Hooch.
Steve Martin and John Candy. We have, Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert.
Yeah.
We have Astaire and Roger. What's chemistry? And how does that click?
I've seen it a few times. You see, I remember Drew Barrymore and Adam Sandler. I thought they were really good together.
Yeah.
It's like when people ask, what makes someone a movie star, you go, I don't know what that is. I recognize it when I see it. I think chemistry in general is one of those things where you go, I only recognize it when I see it. I don't know how you can describe it. Because, you can do something that doesn't work with people that you're really good friends with.
How does that feel? When that happens?
I don't know. I've never had that happen. George, you want to field this?
I'll take that question. I did a film with Julia that didn't work.
See, this is what's been going on all day. And
right.
we're all friends, but people that don't know us are like,
right.
Oh.
Oh, shit.
Is that funny? Am I supposed to laugh?
Yeah. Shame on you, George.
I will say this, though. I think maybe last week when somebody sent me something about our collective movies together.
Oh, yeah, you said that to me.
I'd never really thought of us as seen as this pair.
Right.
And it brought me so much joy.
Yeah.
And job security. I thought, okay, now we're talking. But it really did bring me so much joy to think that people see us as a movie pairing.
Right. So for this particular movie, is it oh, I'll do that movie if Julia's going to do it, or I'm not going to do it.
I mean,
It was absolutely what we said.
literally, we first texted each other and just said, have you read it? And then both of us were like, I'll only do it if you do it.
Yeah. And I remember distinctly talking to Brian and saying, I really just don't know how it works if it's not George.
Yeah.
Right.
And not to say, I mean, in a great script and very funny, obviously we made it, but for me, the whole idea of that relationship and a divorced couple and all that stuff, it really just how well we know each other and the history that we have together.
It's like you said the other day, you think that there's half the country thinks we actually are divorced.
Yeah.
You know?
That's probably true.
So, I mean, that takes a lot of the explaining in the beginning off so that you can jump right into the being rotten to one another.
Sort of like when you don't see a friend for a long time that you love and you just jump right back into it.
Like only a day has gone by.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So does that mean there's going to be more couplings, job security?
I really hope so.
Yeah.
Me too. I'd be shocked if there wouldn't be.
Well, what's the process now for you to get yourself in front of the camera at this point in your life? What has to jump for you to be like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to work now. Because you know how, with the decades of doing your job, how hard it is.
Many
how much
decades
time.
for Julia. Many.
Several, you could even say.
Oh, decades. Honest to God, the one thing that's clear, and I learned, I don't know, decades ago, was if the script doesn't work, then you can't do it. Right. End of story. And then it's the director, I think, probably is the next thing that if we were looking at something, we'd read a script, go, it's good, who's directing it, okay, and then that would be the conversation that I think both of us would have. Right?
I completely agree with that. And for me, I feel like from the very beginning, even back when I really shouldn't have been saying no to anything because I needed the work and I needed the money, and I would read a script and I just would feel it in my bones. Yes, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. And only one time did I not listen to my no, I don't want to do this, and I did it.
And it was a mistake.
It was a personal mistake because I didn't just go for the only time with my instinct.
Right. Do you, George, when you talked about director, so when you're working on a film like Ticket to Paradise, are you actually sort of thinking that's a shitty, it should go this way? Julia, from your experience, are you going like that? Should kind of look like that?
No, you can't be second guessing the director. You have to come before you take the job. You can do all of that. You can say, I don't know, I've seen these films, or I don't know about. Or you check in. Oh, he wants to do. This guy does 70 takes of walking in the door, and you go, I don't really want to work like that. And there are directors like that.
Really?
You know that. Oh, yeah. Lots of them.
Yeah.
Where you just go, and there's directors that yell and scream. I've worked with one or two, and I've always said I'll never do that again.
Okay.
So you do all that vetting before you get there, and once you get in there and start to work, you got to the idea that you can go, well, you could put the camera over there and shoot. I mean, there were a couple of moments on the set where the weather, for instance, started raining and there was no chance that it wasn't going to rain all day. Right. And they were trying to figure out, do we wait or do we not? And then it's like, my experience is shoot it in the rain.
Right.
No, it was so great. And George was like, let's just shoot it in the rain. Because there came a point where you realize this is a monsoon now. The rain is not going to stop. So time is going by. Our window of opportunity is leaving us. And George was like, let's just shoot it in the rain. We'll just shoot it in the rain.
Right.
Yeah. And then when they finally agreed to shoot it in the rain, and all these very correct wardrobe people come out with water bottles to spritz us to make us look wet, and George is like, it's raining, and he just went outside, got wet, and then was like, okay, this is
well, that's always but in general, once you've signed off on a job, you got to
do your job. And we have to have faith in all, which we did, and you don't want to second guess him and
undercut him, because Julia or I on a set, we can really undercut a director, and when you do that, it makes all the other actors who are, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the call sheet, it oftentimes makes them treat that director poorly as well.
Right.
Or just question, like, who do I look to for what's right? And especially, we're working with very good actors, but much younger. They have less experience than we do. And I think it was nice as time went by and we all really got to spend so much time together. And you hear other actors talking about, like, some of the experiences they've had with people who are in the positions of more power and just saying, it's just not fun. It's just you see people with the power and they're kind of throwing it around.
Yeah.
And you kind of forget, like, oh yeah, we could be big fat jerks.
Right. Yeah, that would be horrible.
But why would we be?
Yeah, no.
I enjoy being.
Yeah.
You couldn't be a big fat jerk.
I enjoy it.
Welcome back to my conversation with Julia Roberts and George Clooney on Table for Two. You know, something that I've always loved about these two is that they really make you forget that they are the Julia Roberts and George Clooney. But of course that makes sense, because those weren't always household names. There was a time when George was a struggling television actor, and Julia was praying for a commercial gig. So let's get back into it and hear about when the tides started to shift in their careers. You talked, Julia mentioned a little bit about going with your gut at a time when you shouldn't have even said no to jobs, right? It feels like with actors specifically, there's a long time in one's career where you're asking for work, for validation, and then it doesn't flip for a lot of people, but it flipped, and then now you're in a different position. When did that happen for you, and how did that feel, and how did that affect you making choices in the business?
Well, I, for one, am so grateful for all of the jobs that I wanted more than life itself that I didn't get.
Really?
I think about the commercials. I think about
You cried when you didn't
the
get it.
TV shows that I was like, oh God, I was so close. How did I not get that job? And I am so grateful now. So grateful.
Because
Because she would have done them and she wouldn't have had the career.
Yeah, or, there would just be a document of time that you don't want following you around or whatever it is. And I just feel like...
She's pointing at my career.
Yeah,
Right?
it's kind of like, when you think about mullet.
It's a good mullet.
it was a good moment.
You know what? It was such a fully realized mullet. Like,
Yeah.
it was commitment.
Yeah.
And I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
And the mullet is making a comeback.
I was going to
That's
say.
even worse.
It is making a
It
comeback.
makes me sad.
It's like fully making a comeback.
Really?
I have 2 teenage boys. Yeah.
Do they
it's
really
making
mullet? Yeah, it's a
No,
comeback.
Finn doesn't. But Henry has a quasi mullet
Okay.
that actually is pretty cool. I'll show you a picture. Danny cut his hair. He was like, Dad, I want a mullet. And I said to Danny, don't go mullet.
full.
Yeah.
Don't go full.
Medium mullet.
When I think about George and Julia, I think of how successful they've both been. But it's so important to remember that in order to get to that success, both of them had to endure failure first. But they're better for it, and they have the careers that they do because of it.
I mean, as actors, aren't we like innately insecure and we suffer from imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff? So even what someone else would say, this is the point in George's career when he made it. Like, that's when it all turned. That's
Bam.
He probably has different feelings about it. He being him, being you,
Right.
Yes.
sitting right here next to him.
Well, I do have different feelings about it, only that I failed in so many shows. I was on 7 series before ER and 13 pilots.
Wow.
And so I was almost successful a bunch. And by the way, when you're an actor and you're on a series, you're beating the odds by a billion. So I felt like I was successful. But I felt like I was sort of a journeyman. I was stuck in doing some pretty bad television along the way. I was bad in it. I'm not blaming them. And then ER hit. And ER was 40 million people a week. It was the most popular show ever.
I watched it.
I
didn't miss
That
an
was
episode.
what
And it was
CTV,
Thursday nights.
night,
And it changed overnight. Like a week later, 2 weeks later, I guess, we were on the cover of Newsweek.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, we'd walk down the streets of New York and everyone not only recognized it, but they knew our names, our actual name. And I remember walking with Benny, who my buddy Benny, and we were walking to New York. They're like, hey, George. And I was like, and I looked at Benny and said, I just got famous.
Yeah.
And, it's funny, that's that bug light that you chase in a way that once you get there, it's like, oops.
Yeah.
It's a little, but it
Why?
changed.
Because it just
Because
becomes scary, or
because of
just
all the other
invasive?
things that come along with the loss of privacy and the responsibility. But your mentality is still, you're a working and a struggling actor. Mm-hmm. And it was that way for a while. So I took jobs along those lines with the show, I took films. I got an offer, I took it. Oh my God, I'm going to do it. Even to the point of the one I always joke about, which is Batman, which is a terrible film. I'm bad in it, but I was thrilled. I was over the moon.
You were Batman.
I was Batman, and it's a big flop, and that's okay. But what it taught, that moment, that minute of failure, and failure's that's where you learn. You don't learn in success. And the minute I failed and I realized, I'm going to be held responsible for the movies, not for my performance anymore, but for the films themselves that get made because they're making them on my back. And so from then on, my choices were about screenplay and director. And the next 3 films for me, and I held out for other films, were Out of Sight, Three Kings, and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And so
I love all 3 of those movies.
It was like, I get it. I'm going to be held responsible. So there was a moment that I could point to that said it, the career change, which is ER. And there was a moment which taught me how to change that trajectory, and that was Batman.
For yourself.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And you also did something with that, which was, I think, unique, becoming a big television star and then becoming a movie star, which didn't really happen. It seemed like it was boxed.
Well, it's funny because it goes in cycles, right? Because Clint Eastwood was a TV star and he was a giant movie star. There are a few guys that did it, but then it became impossible, and they really shut down the door. And there were guys like David Caruso and guys who left TV shows to have a big film career, and they really made it almost impossible to do. And it's changed considerably now, don't you think? I feel like that's not...
Yeah, now people don't look at the differences in the way that they do.
Just because there's so much more expansive TV with...
Yeah, because it's both. People are allowed to kind of do what they want. But I think for you, I can't imagine what it would be like becoming wildly famous on a TV show when you're in people's homes.
Every day, yeah.
When people can sit in their slippers...
They know you personally.
Yeah, because you come to their house every week.
And that kind of fame, and remember, this isn't just small TV. This is 40 million people.
No, I can't imagine what it felt like.
I was on a plane with a big movie star, and we got off the plane, we were flying somewhere, and they were like, oh my God, and they were all staying back, from the star. And then they see me, it's like, George! And they grab you.
Yeah, different
because
energy.
They've seen you in their
house,
and they've got a remote, and they can make you talk or not talk, and you're tiny compared to a big movie star. So you really are personally there. They know you personally, and so there was a different kind of energy. And what people won't remember, but up until Perfect Storm, which was the year I left the show when my contract was up until then, and I had like Three Kings and Oh Brother and Out of Sight and some other films. Up until that moment, it was just, every article was like, he's not going to make it. Every article was, every single piece, every question was like, he doesn't have it. In fact, there were directors that quit. Sidney Pollack quit. He was going to direct Out of Sight, and he quit because he said he's not a movie star. About me, when I got the job. Now, and that happened with a couple of directors.
Julia's mouth is wide open,
I'm
like
stunned.
stunned. I
And
know,
the funny
me
thing is,
too.
I worked with Sidney later and Michael Clayton, and I walked over and I said, "Hey, man," and he goes, "Listen, all right, take it easy."
Okay, I was wrong.
No, I loved him. I really loved him, and I didn't hold it against him at the time. But so the narrative was very different.
It was really different.
And it was a hard thing to cross over at that moment.
But there's divine intervention right there because you end up with Steven.
Yeah,
And the
exactly.
movie is so
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, and
It is so good, that movie.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Every
Yeah,
time
yeah,
I
yeah.
watch it, and I've watched it more than once, which I can't say for any of my movies.
Really?
Yes.
I don't know.
I rediscover. I find every time I watch it, I go, God, it's so good.
Yeah, it's good. Don was so good.
I mean, but everybody, and the way it's cut and everything, and just...
Well, you know what? The other thing was Stephen was coming off of two, I guess, not very, like The Underneath, and movies that no one saw and weren't really, certainly weren't received well after having such a great start. So we were both, when we met for this, and I was already attached, and then we went over, Danny DeVito was a producer, and we went over to Michael, Stacey shared Michael Shamberg's house. And there was that moment where, I looked at Stephen, he looked at me, and we both needed a success. Mm-hmm. We were both up against it. And there's something really good about having your back against the wall. Steven, and if you ask Steven his best film, he'd put that as one of his best films. I think he'd put Rokovich and Traffic, which is that
which he made one after the other
in the same year.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I remember when he wanted to ask Jules, his now wife, out, and we were doing Oceans. I think we were in New Jersey then. And he's like, I want to ask her out, but I don't think so. And that was the morning that he was nominated for directing both films, Aaron Brockovich and Traffic. And I said, Steven, now listen to me. If there's ever a day that you can ask out this beautiful woman, it's today. Call her up.
And they're
That is so fun.
So sweet.
Welcome back to Table for Two. As my conversation with Julia Roberts and George Clooney wanders from story to story, I'm reminded that even big-time actors can get starstruck about those who came before them. Do you ever think about some movie star in the past that no longer exists that you would have loved to have worked with?
Well, worked with, I don't know. But I mean, to have met, to have shared time with,
Yes.
I would say Katharine Hepburn. I mean, she's the ultimate.
Yeah.
Audrey Hepburn, who I did meet one time, which was other...
Where did you meet her?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you the story.
Yeah.
You've probably heard this story 1,000 years ago, but once upon a time, I was in Europe with friends, and it just so happened that we went on an Audrey Hepburn movie marathon binge for like a long weekend.
And where are you? What part of Europe?
I was in London.
Okay.
And flying back to America, and I get on the plane and I get myself situated. Now, me on an airplane is about 5 seconds of buckling my seatbelt and, 11 and a half hours of sleeping.
Right, okay.
And I get on the plane and I get all, situated and stuff, and I'm sitting there and I was in first class.
Yes, good.
Ooh.
Yes, very,
good.
very fancy, and not a lot of people in first class. And I look over, so I'm sitting in a window seat. So
Oh my
there's a
God,
seat
you're
next to
gonna
me,
tell me-
and there's
oh my
middle
God.
section, and then over there is Audrey Hepburn.
Wow.
And I honestly, it's like, am I making this up?
Right.
Is she really there?
Yeah.
Is she? And I just was like, go to sleep. You gotta go to sleep. Like, I didn't know what to do with myself.
Right.
Anyway, I was beside myself. And should I talk to her? Should I not talk to her? I can't talk to her. I walk up to her and go, hi, I'm an actor and I just love you. And I just didn't know what to do. So I did fall asleep. And then when I wake up, when the wheels touch the ground, which is my
It's amazing
MO.
that you can do that. Wow.
Thank you. And I think, okay, there's long lines at customs.
Right.
I will pull my stuff together, put a piece of gum in my mouth, and say hello.
Right.
Well, she doesn't have an American passport.
Oh, no.
She's
And another place.
somewhere else.
She's in the other line.
And I missed my chance. My chance is over. And I'm so disappointed in myself. And really disappointed. And I go downstairs, because this was back in the day when I checked a bag. And I go down to baggage claim, and I get my bag. And as I turn around, because, the guy takes your ticket and looks at the thing, standing right in front of me with her checked bag is Audrey Hepburn.
Right.
And she turns to me and she goes, "You're wonderful."
Wow.
With her arms out like this and hugs me. And I was just like,
Oh.
I just said, she has no idea. She has no idea what is happening to my entire life right now.
Yeah.
And I had to call my friends and like, so every movie there was Charade, I was like, she is right there. I just could not believe it.
Wow, what
Yeah.
a cool story. And like, yet again, timing. It wasn't meant to be on the plane. That's
It
what
was,
it was meant
so
to be.
magnificent. And
That's beautiful.
unbeknownst to any of us at the time, she was unwell.
Yeah.
And she was given a Screen Actors Guild Lifetime Achievement Award back in the day when they were these kind of smaller things, whatever. And she wrote me a letter and asked me to receive it on her behalf.
Oh.
And she wrote a speech and asked me to recite the speech. And Gregory Peck
Yeah. They
presented
were
it.
dear friends.
And it was just my whole life, I just thought, what is happening right now? Gregory Peck is I'm sort of the proxy for Audrey Hepburn. What is going on? And I read this beautiful speech that she'd written. I mean, it was...
That's
I
an
kind of forget
incredible
that
story.
even happened to me because it was so... It just sounds like fiction.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm on this plane. And, I mean, it just...
That's wild.
It sounds like a made-up story,
That
but
is
it all
incredible.
happened.
I love that. And she was, I mean, honest to God, when you look at like the epitome of class, she just was so elegant. And she was elegant from Roman Holiday on.
Yeah.
She started there. She didn't have the mullet ears, She just started with a ballet dancer and just went from there.
And UNICEF and all of it.
Sure.
I mean, amazing.
Mr. Clooney, do you have somebody?
Well, I have guys that like for instance, I think that as an actor, the guy that moved me the most would always be Spencer Tracy because I couldn't take my eye off him. Anything he did, so I loved him. In sort of the newer method actors, I really loved the first one, which people overlook often, which was Monty Clift before Brandon, before James. He was Monty Clift, and if you watch like he and Elizabeth Taylor in A Place in the Sun, I don't think there's two sexier people, and I don't think there's a more beautiful sort of told tragic love story. There's that shot where you just see her eyes over his shoulder when he says, there's so much I wish I could tell you. She goes, tell mama. And you're like, I'll tell you, mama.
I remember hearing the story that there was a line in it that he says to her where he says, I'll love you always. And he said, I love you always.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right? Just the little, just him kind of. But that's another example of people that their friendship, I think, allowed them to really be vulnerable.
She stuck up for him later when he was sick.
Yeah.
Two other actors that had a huge impact on me in my life, which was I was friends with Paul Newman and I was friends with Gregory Peck. And those two men, first of all, were about the two most elegant movie stars you could ever meet. But they were also crazy funny. And had wicked sense of humor. Newman played pranks on me, but they were citizens of the world in a way that I loved. They were the examples that I look at and say, well, those are the people that you aim for,
right?
And that they're that light in the sky that you look at.
I mean, I think it's really clear that the two of you sit in those seats with the younger generation of actors. You talk about the sort of generosity of your work, your generosity of spirit when you're with people, but you also use your celebrity in such a powerful give back way. Did you just know when that moment was to start to use your voice? I can, remember in the 90s, seeing you, watching you. When did you kind of...
I was very young when Julia was famous.
In the 90s.
Yes.
Right.
I was a child watching her in the theater.
Yeah, right.
I remember those days.
Remember those days?
When I came in my covered wagon.
Oh yeah.
But
I think that we were always, speaking up. It's just that no one was necessarily listening until sort of other things happened in life. Because I grew up in the 60s and 70s, which is if you weren't talking about the civil rights movement or the women's rights movement or the Vietnam, or the drug counterculture or any of that stuff, you weren't having some opinion and talking and defending some ideas, you weren't part of the society.
Yeah.
But don't you also think that being the child of a journalist, you have a great inside track to really knowing everything that's going on in a way that maybe some of the kids in your community wouldn't have really understood.
Also, my father's thing was always about challenging people, So I remember going to Catholic school and getting kicked out in, I think, 5th grade for a week because I'd written a piece about Doubting Thomas. And Doubting Thomas was the guy who said, I want to put my hand in the wound. You said that Jesus rose again. I'm going to put my finger in the wound or I don't believe you. And he was, sent away. And I wrote a piece because they asked us to write a piece about the Bible. And I wrote a piece saying that Doubting Thomas was a reporter and that he was the the most informed because he said, I'm in, but I need some proof.
Stigmata.
Right.
Give it.
I want some proof. That gets you in trouble in the Catholic school in
Wow.
She's suspended for a week.
1970. My father was very proud of the fact that I was kicked out. So I think I had a great advantage because my father was always about asking questions and not taking things at face value.
So what gives you hope today? What is, as we sort of, head towards
The world falling apart? You know what gives me hope? Yeah, every time I'm around young people, when we were doing the March for Our Lives, it gave me incredible hope. I stand there and go, they don't look at this and say, this is the status quo. They look at it and go, why can't this be fucking changed? And I go, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Because I fall into it at times where I'll go, well, this is the best available. This is the best thing we can do now.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, it's right to reach. It's right to push in a way that I suppose my younger self would have.
I could talk to Julia and George for hours, and the fact that we're in a hotel room and not a restaurant means there's no check to come or meal to finish. So it really could go on forever. But these are people with a lot of commitments, and I gotta let them go. Well, I have to just fan out. I love you both so much. I've had the pleasure of really spending significant, intimate moments.
Intimate meaning, let me just say it this way.
Yeah, just say
At
it.
our wedding.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay, so
Oh.
the people who don't know Bruce have to understand two things. One is he's built like something Michelangelo has carved out of a piece of marble.
True. This is true. I can.
Number one. And number two, he's the first person to show you that at every party, at every dinner.
Maybe take a shirt off.
Shirt comes off like before dessert. Right?
Oh,
Woof,
God.
off it comes.
The prelude to dessert.
And I can't tell you how many events, parties I've been to where whoosh, the shirt comes off. And I remember one at our wedding, Matt Damon pulls his shirt off, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Oh, Bruce is here?
Yeah, put your shirt back on.
This will haunt me, and it was, well, first of all, your wedding was epic.
Well,
I didn't think about the moment when I left your wedding in my tuxedo without a shirt on, and all of a sudden there was
And now it's a trend. Now dudes are showing up on red carpets with jackets on and no shirt all
Julia
over.
Roberts.
You started it.
you, Julia.
Julia, I just got to say thank you so much for joining me on Table for Two. I love you both so much. I
Love
can
you.
fan out. I love you,
you too,
Julia
bro.
Roberts. I love you, George Clooney. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks.
Table for Two with Bruce Bozzi is produced by iHeartRadio, 737 Park, and Airmail. Our executive producers are Bruce Bozzi, Jonathan Haas-Dressler, and Nathan King. Table for Two is edited and written by Tina Mullen and researched and written by Bridget Arsenault. Our sound engineers are Emil B. Klein, Paul Bowman, and Alyssa Midgaff. Table for Two's LA production team is Danielle Romo and Lorraine Virez. Our music supervisor is Randall Poster. Our talent booking is by Jane Sarkin. Special thanks to Amy Sugarman, Uni Scher, Kevin Uvain, Bobby Bauer, Allison Cantor-Graber, and for more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.